Hello and welcome to Political Capital, the intersection of money and politics. I'm Karabole Tlatla. We're coming to you from Gallagher in Johannesburg, the home of the Pan-African Parliament. For the last several years, it's moved here from Addis Ababa as a move to decentralize organs of the continent away from Ethiopia. But who is the Pan-African Parliament and what powers do they have in solving Africa's problems? We answer that question later in the show, but first up, Chris Bishop has your papers.
Breaking news at the top. Mining production falls much further than expected in a bad sign for GDP, so says the Business Day. Gold production fell 18% and diamond output was down almost 25%. South Africa's mining production fell 8.4% in March from the same month in 2017, far more than a 2.6% drop forecast. Gupta's still in the country, so says Julius Malema in The Citizen. The Guptas are still in the country and their companies are still in operation, says the Economic Freedom Fighters leader. He also talked about a pledge at the funeral of Mama Winnie Mandela to go with President Cyril Ramaphosa to Marikana to talk to the widows of the infamous massacre. I'm not going with Cyril to Marikana. He must go there alone. Mama said she will go to Marikana with Cyril, and she said I will accompany her. I was going to accompany Mama, not Cyril. He must go alone. I've been to Marikana by myself before. And finally, speaking of the president, shut up. Cyril Ramaphosa and John Steenhuisen lock horns in Pali. So says the South African. The thorny issue of land redistribution seemed to spark the pair off. Cyril Ramaphosa has repeatedly called for cross-party talks about this policy, but judging by the atmosphere on the front benches, they'll have to be kept at arm's length. Now, this was the subject of the debut for Political Capital cartoonist Bonnie Swazi. It depicts Parliament, maybe appropriately, as a kid's playground. Shut up, says the President. I'm telling the teacher you said shut up, quips the DA Chief Whip Steenhuisen. The Economic Freedom Fighters swing former Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille around the roundabout. The DA's Helen Ziller stands by, whistling into the wind. Now, speaking of controversial political leaders, this week we talked to Makhosi Khoza, the woman who left the ANC, formed a new political party, and then left that.
Thank you for joining us on Political Capital. Today we've got Dr. Makhosi Khoza, who's just been appointed as the Executive Director at OUTA. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about this new appointment.
Thank you very much for having me. This new appointment is very exciting, not just for me at a personal level, but I think for South African local citizens who have been neglected for quite a long time. As you know, local government is a sphere that we have not really paid too much attention to. And if you consider the fact that on average a municipality make 90% of revenue from local citizens and local businesses, it's actually tragic that we have neglected this sphere. And I'm very excited about joining OUTA, and I'm ready to be part of the action.
Some have argued, Doctor, this afternoon on social media that joining OUTA is a political suicide, especially for a high-ranking, trusted political figure as yourself.
Well, you know, other people may say whatever they want to say. I have assessed the environment, and judging by voter apathy, the reality of the situation is that citizens, it is citizens that actually want us to invest in civil society movements as opposed to, you know, trusting governments. I mean, if you look at the recent results or votes at Wits University, where the EFF won 14 seats out of 15 in the SRC, the voter turnout was only 8%. And even if you look at South Africa, although we have the ANC that is holding 60% of the seats at national level, but the reality is that they only got 11 million votes out of 26 million registered voters, and that's below 50%. So I'm saying to you, we need to actually be consistent with the trends. People are really looking at civil society, and I think this is the age of an active citizen. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more citizens participating in governance than ever before.
And Doctor, another aspect of this appointment, it comes at a very awkward time, I could say, for OUTA, when there's been this recent commotion when it comes to the gentleman that just resigned from OUTA with regards to the allegations that were thrown at the organization.
You know, if you are a rational and objective being, you must not make your decisions based on maybe smear campaigns or based on information that you have not tested. I have looked at that, and as far as I am concerned, I still believe that OUTA is an organization to reckon with, and I am looking at their own focus on local governance, and I feel strongly that this is where we should be focusing on. As a matter of fact, who right now is focusing on corruption, poor service delivery, and maladministration, irregular, fruitless expenditure at local level? Nobody. Outside government, except you only hear of local government when we hear AG, the Audit General. But other than that, we are not necessarily focusing on that. And I don't think we should really be tarnishing good organizations. Simply one person who is bitter about something is saying this or that about the organization. I don't make my decisions that way.
Don't you think it's a little bit too far, local government, considering a whole lot of things that is happening there? And well, I know that you are the most highly qualified when it comes to this, but don't you think it's a little bit too far?
It's not. Actually, local government is the closest sphere of government. You are born in a municipality, you grow up in a municipality, you eat in a municipality, you sleep in a municipality, you even die in a municipality, and you are buried there. You can't be buried in Gauteng, you can't be buried in South Africa. You've got to be buried somewhere in a locality. So we should be focusing there, and I think we are really doing a disservice if we are alienating local citizens from the governance of the country. And if you look at the amount of money that is wasted on things that citizens don't want, and the money that is embezzled in wrong ways at local government level, it's about time that people like myself, people like OUTA and the organization focus their energies on the sphere of government that has been neglected.
How easy do you think that is going to be, considering that there are many of people who have embezzled government money who are still right now in power, irregardless of the power changes in South Africa?
We are closing the space for the recycling of corrupt people. Whether it's in local government, somebody gets recycled from local government to national, and then they do something at national, they come back at local. I think as citizens, we have to take our rightful place and act on this thing and hold local government accountable and hold the entire government accountable. It's our money. Government does not, this money is coming from your tax, it's coming from my tax, it's coming from that mama who is buying something at the shop every day, paying VAT. And it's about time we hold government to account for these monies.
Doctor, going back to the political sphere, you have been in the ANC since your early days in your life, and you have undergone a lot. But take us through the transition that you've gone through, leaving and resigning from the ANC.
Well, I have to tell you that I'm still very grateful to the ANC. By the way, all my postgraduate qualifications, the ANC paid for them. They actually did that. I'm very grateful. And I'm also very grateful about what I mean, when I look at what Cyril Ramaphosa, for example, is doing, I'm encouraged. However, it's very important for us to understand that a liberation movement has a very limited lifespan. At some point, it fulfills its mission and it's got to move on. And I think democracy in South Africa is being reshaped on a daily basis. And if you look at everywhere in the continent, you shall notice that each time once a liberation movement reaches 20 years, it begins to decline drastically. And we've seen that beginning to happen. So that making that necessary shift for me was not necessarily difficult, because the only reason why I participated and I got involved in the ANC is because I wanted to live in a free and fair, just and prosperous South Africa. And I'm still in pursuit of that.
Saying that the ANC, Doctor, is your home, when you look at the African National Congress in this present day, what are your thoughts and feelings?
Well, I'm just hoping that, you know, at some point it will self-correct. But I doubt if there is a criminal that can simply decide that today I'm going to stop stealing, unless there is a consequence to that. Unless we jail those people who are corrupt, unless we begin to take decisive action on them, then we will be sending a very strong message. I'm just hoping that Cyril Ramaphosa, given the fact that there are civil society organizations that are out there, because the intention is not to be antagonistic to any government, whether it's the ANC or whatever, all that we are dealing with is corruption. And I'm sure everybody won't have a problem with the ANC or the DA or the EFF. All they want to see, people want to see a clean governance, a government that of the people, by the people, that is doing all the services for the people the best they could.
How difficult was it to take that decision to leave the ANC? You've risked your life by coming out and in defense of the ANC and in defense of the truth and against corruption throughout these recent years. But how difficult was it for you to just leave the ANC?
Well, leaving the ANC wasn't, and if you remember very well, when I resigned, I actually did say that I am resigning from this alien, corrupt ANC. The values that I was taught, the values of people-centered governance, the values of quality services, the values of, you know, because the ANC, you must remember, it was established as a response of, in 1910, when the Union of South Africa was established, were excluded. That values of inclusion, to me, are the values that are still with me. So even though I might have left the brand, but the values are still with me, because you can't take away the principles that a person lives by on a daily basis. And I am using those values even now when I'm with OUTA. Those are the values that I'm going to be using to be people-centered and to ensure that people get the services that they deserve, quality services that they deserve.
When we return, we look at issues facing the 6th session of the 4th Pan-African Parliament, the powers of this organization, and the struggle for the control of it. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the intersection of politics and money. This is Political Capital. Now, not many people know of the Pan-African Parliament, its issues, or indeed if it has any real power. It was founded in 2004, its first inaugural Congress happening in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. That was before finding its new home here in Midrand, South Africa. It is the legislative arm of the African Union, and it has oversight powers as well as consultative and advisory role. But is that any real power? In October 2009, the second legislature of the Pan-African Parliament opened its first ordinary session and began a 5-year mandate from here in Midrand. But what has this parliament, that so few have heard of, achieved so far?
The Pan-African Parliament meets 4 times in a year. I reported for work here in April last year. We met in May, we met in August, we met in October, we met again in March this year, and we are meeting again now. And the other achievements are that in the course of last year, in exercise of its mandate as an advisory and consultative body, the Pan-African Parliament was very instrumental in getting the sanctions against Sudan lifted by the United States government. Towards the end of the year, again, the Pan-African Parliament started working towards getting the sanctions against Chad lifted, and we are still in that process. Parliament has passed a number of resolutions. Parliament has discussed a number of model laws in health, model laws in policing, model laws in free movement. So I think that those have been great achievements.
It's tough going here. This Pan-African Parliament has 255 representatives that are elected by legislatures of their own member countries, rather than being elected directly in their own capacity. Nonetheless, the plate is always full.
We have issues of health. We have issues of the ongoing reforms in the African Union. We have issues on peacekeeping and political affairs. We have issues on trade and industrial development. I think those are the main issues. We also have issues on the relationship between the African Union and Europe, AU-EU relationship. We have a partnership. The African Union has a partnership with the Europe, with the EU. And towards the end of the session, this session, the 6th session of the 4th Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament, there will be a discussion also, a follow-up discussion on that relationship. As you know, there was a major meeting between the Europeans and the Africans in Abidjan, in Côte d'Ivoire, last year. So parliamentarians will be reviewing that meeting.
This year's theme is winning the fight against corruption, a concept the host country, South Africa, knows a little too well.
I think for the broader continent and the region, either than just South Africa on its own, we've been dealing with our own issues of state capture and the various other corruption cases that have been unmasked. But I think it's crucial to not just speak about these things generally, to actually go deeper to finding out what do we mean when we speak about corruption. If there's been monies that have been squandered, who has that money been squandered by, and how much of that money are we able to retrieve when we capture the person? Then most of the time you would find out that you are dealing with a representative, an official that has been found of a wrongdoing. But the monies are never spoken of. So, for example, let me make a simple case. One squanders 10 million rand and is then arrested and then put before a suspension or trial. You then ask the question, how much of that 10 million has been actually spent? And if there is a balance of 6 million, what happens to that 6 million? Is it retrieved? Does it come back? We need to dwell deeper into these questions of corruption and ensure that people are held accountable, people are be able to be put before the courts of law, and people are actually prosecuted. If we are not doing that, we simply are not taking corruption as a serious issue.
Yes, there are problems in this continent. There are problems in all continents. But the Pan-African Parliament is not the answer to all the problems of Africa. And so we are willing to take our share of the blame for issues that fall within our mandate that we have not implemented. This morning, in one of the presentations by the African Union, I think it was the Commissioner on Political Affairs, we were told that since the African Union started, I think going back to the time when it was the Organization of African Union, there have been 1,700 resolutions passed. And a statement was made that the level of implementation is at 5%.
In 2009, then South African President Jacob Zuma called for the parliament to be given full legislative powers, a struggle that continues today.
Yes, it requires a lot of the members that have been sent to this August House to ensure that we begin lobbying internally in our very own countries through our own parliaments, so that we exert pressure on our heads of state to be able to pass a resolution within the African Union that this body is able to be regarded a separate entity. I mean, some of the challenges we've been able to see in the few days that we have been here. The clerk of the Pan-African Parliament is actually appointed by the African Union, and therefore only accounts to the African Union and doesn't account to the Pan-African Parliament. And these are some of the concerns that we have and want to bring about change in that regard.
But this struggle for power is internal as well.
As to who is going to emerge winner, I can also tell you that. I don't know.
The fight for the control of this parliament is currently underway, with 4 regions backing their own presidential candidate. One of those is Mustafi El Gandhi, an Egyptian member of parliament and a presidential hopeful from the north of the continent.
Do we have a political will? I have a political will. I have a political will that there is visibility in the parliament. It's simple. I will call 2 or 3 big auditors. They will come, stay a week. I will stay home. I will drink my coffee, and I will come here with reports. And it's finished. If you want to fight corruption, it's simple. But do you want to fight corruption? This is the question. I want a visible place like that. When the donors comes, they can see where the money goes, but they cannot tell me where the money should go. This will not be accepted.
After all the handshakes, hugs and wooing of friends, Mustafa hopes that this will be enough to carry him over the finish line. But this parliament has never had a president from either south or north.
You know, you always hear about Anglophone and Francophone. I am Francophone myself because I was in school. I'm Anglophone and I'm Arabophone. And this is one of the reasons that I'm having a lot of support of my sister and brother MPs. But it is true, and it's a shame. It's a shame when we are fighting for the language of the colonizers. It's really a shame. It's a big shame when you say we are the richest continent and the poorest continent. This is a shame. We can say that when the father founder came and died for liberation, for independence, for United States of Africa. They had a dream, but they didn't have the tool with them. Education, generations who went abroad, who got education, we have them now. Now we need a second revolution, but we will call it an evolution. Evolution is much better because you go to the roots of the thing. And the roots is young and youth. Youth have to dream. Youth have the right to dream. Then let us give the dream. We can give the dream with a partnership. I hate assistana. I don't believe in assistana. We are old enough, okay? We don't need nobody to assist us, but we can assist each other. We can work together. We have young generation who have very good education. They live abroad, they are in hospital, they are in university, they are everywhere. Now's the time.
But the term for the Pan-African Parliament president is 3 years, and as a former vice president of the parliament, Mustafa thinks that it's time to bring about reforms.
People are fed up of parties who are telling them story and who do not realize nothing. One of them saying I'm a left wing, the other one say I'm right wing. When they come to power, they are middle wing. How we are going to pump out of this nation as maximum as we can with corruption or with no rule of law, then this is a political will.
Mustafa was in opposition during the Egyptian revolution that toppled Hosni Mubarak in 2011, and again when the Islamic Brotherhood came undone. But this time around, he hopes to be fighting from the inside.
Because it's about time. It's about time to give the responsibility to the South and to give the responsibility to the North. This is a rotation issue, and that's one of the things I'm promising my brother and sister MPs here, that the minute I become president, I would change these rules to be written on the papers, that it's on a rotation system. Like we are in the North, 7 countries. There is Caucasus where you have 18 countries, then you will never get nothing if there is no rotation. And rotation is everywhere, even in the United Nations, even in the Security Council. Then rotation gives the possibility for the North to give what they have. Like in Egypt, we have 150 years of parliament. We just celebrated 150 years of experience of parliament. We can share a lot. South Africa have a lot to share. Then other countries in the south or in the north have a lot to share. Algeria have a lot to share. Morocco have a lot to share. Then the rotation issue is very important. It's all about democracy. It's all about one Africa, one voice. Because if you go this way, it will be one Africa central region voice, because they had it 3 times, 2 times, and now they want to run again for the 3rd time. Then I think it's about time, and the MP will go for it.
Ultimately, this parliament is only as good as its member states allow it to be. For the achievements to match its long list of ambitions, it would have to have more power. Well, that's all we had on this edition of Political Capital. Remember to join us again on Tuesday at 6:30 on CNBC Africa as we continue to keep a score on Africa's political economy. Good evening.